For Christian's first birthday, I bought him one of these little Tyke basketball goals because I had this vision that my son Christian was going to become a basketball player. So it's on. Yeah, it's not me. Sorry. Yeah, so I had this vision that my son was going to become a basketball player. He would love the sport as much as I do. He was just bouncing around, stumbling, not even walking well. And I had these visions of him dunking this little Tyke's goal and all of this and playing basketball. Couldn't really even hold it or shoot or anything. Well, I realized he wasn't going to be a basketball player when I got the opportunity to coach his team at I Am Third. And I think what they did, this was my first opportunity teaching or coaching I Am Third. And I think what they did is like, okay, we've got an overflow of athletes. So we're going to take every child that has never, ever touched a ball in his life, and we're going to put them on David's team. I'm like, all right, we're going to go. We're going to roll with it. So I had this big idea. I'm going to go to Walmart or Dick's and buy a bunch of these orange cones. I'm going to put them along the court, and we're going to learn some drills of dribbling, weaving in and out, getting light on your feet, and all of this stuff. So I get my team together. I'm like, okay, that's not working. So I don't know what we're going to do. There's no skill whatsoever. So a coach on the other end of the court says, hey, let's scrimmage. And I'm thinking, have you been watching? Like, there's no scrimmaging that's going to happen. So I'm like, all right, let's run with it. We'll do it. So we start scrimmaging, and I'm blown away. Like, all of a sudden, they're dribbling. And all of a sudden, they're passing. And they're noticing that there's arms in the way, so they'll bounce pass. And even though the highest scoring game that we had the whole season was 6, they were learning in that moment. It was phenomenal. It was like the real-time experience was creating a growth in them that there was absolutely no other substitute for. So fast forward to one of the games, and my son is going to play. He's going to start the second half, and I turn around and I look, and Christian's out there mid-court. The half has started. They're at this goal, doing some plays, and I look around and I don't see Christian. So I turn back around, and he's at half court, like this right here, could you not? Just watching the game. Just taking it all in, identifying, yeah, that's a good move, his favorite. And I'm like, Christian, get your hands out of your pockets. It's time to play. And I realized in that moment, okay, he doesn't love basketball. But he goes on, he plays some football. He's actually really good, got some natural talent there, and he's evolved into a phenomenal writer. So the hopes and dreams of this father for him playing professional basketball didn't play out, but he's still my son and I love him very much. But back to the moment in question. It's like in real life, real time, real scenarios, there's an experience that happens. And when you and I intentionally engage it, there's some growth that actually makes you and I good intention. So welcome to Madison Hills, where anyone and everyone can experience the growth necessary for you in your real-time life to get good intention. And this is week 2 of our mini-series, Good Intention. And what we're going to do this morning is we're going to walk through 2 chapters in the Old Testament. And they're centered around a young man named Joseph. And they're chapter 37 and 39. There's a little interplay there that doesn't have anything pertinent for us. But these 2 chapters are extremely important for our study this morning because as you're reading through Genesis, the previous 36 chapters, they're all designed, they're articulated by the author to demonstrate just how faithful God is to his promises to his people. 36 chapters in, and we're demonstrating how faithful God is to his promises to his people. You turn the page to chapter 37, and you embark upon this journey with Joseph in his real-time life, and you see that the author takes time to articulate and demonstrate that this young man, Joseph, is extremely faithful to his God. And what we see in chapter 37 is the context of the tension, the context of the conflict in Joseph's life that actually sets him up for chapter 39, where he demonstrates, wow, you can really be good in tension, and here are the qualities necessary. So we're going to look at chapters 37 and 39. But before we get there, when you think about tension and our growth and our experience with it, it is all through the Bible, both Old and New Testaments. And here it's sprinkled through in just random passages or with the author wanting to make a point. Here are just a few references. Romans 5, some of you know this by heart. Suffering. It's not just this invaluable experience. It's not something that's just painful and we want to get through it as quickly as possible. Suffering actually has value because suffering produces perseverance. And perseverance is not even the end goal. It actually produces character, these qualities within us that demonstrate, wow, we are aligning ourselves with the purposes and ways of God. And then character actually produces hope. So suffering is the beginning of actually understanding how this idea of hope happens in someone's life. Or James 1, let perseverance finish its work so that you can be complete and mature. In other words, perseverance has work to do. There's no substitute for moving forward regardless of what you are experiencing in real time. There's no substitute for moving forward simply to move forward. You're growing in those moments because perseverance has literal work to do that nothing else can. 2 Corinthians 12, God's grace is sufficient for us, especially in our times of need, because when you and I are weak, His power is actually made perfect in our lives. In other words, what we experience real time can set us up to become really good, intense moments. So in chapter 37, Joseph is the youngest of several siblings, and he's doing some shepherding work with his brothers, and he's actually observing them. And I don't know if this is just like a sibling thing or what. I'm an only child. Any other only children? Yeah, it's a pretty sweet life in a lot of ways, isn't it? Yeah, it's pretty sweet. And the more I look at my children and observe them throughout the years, being or having a sibling blows my mind that you can be so irate with someone. And then 5 seconds later, you're defending them to the parents. And you're just in love with these individuals. That blows my mind. But I don't know if this is a sibling thing or what. But Joseph observes his brothers in this shepherding context. And then the text tells us that he sends their father a bad report. So there's going to be some tension developing. Well, the story goes on, and simply because Joseph was the baby. Any babies in the family? Did you get special attention? Okay, so simply since Joseph is the baby of the family, the text tells us in the next slide, the text tells us that his father loved him more than all the other brothers. Well, the brothers see this playing out. So the text goes on, it says, so the brothers, they hated him. They hate their brother. And then Joseph has these 2 dreams. And in the dreams, he actually sees his brother and his parents bowing down before him. Now, granted, I get it. Like if I was to share that with you, that would be a hard pill to swallow, right? Like I had this dream and Bob, we were just hanging out and then we just paused for a second and you just bowed down before me. And I was like, man, God is good, like you present that to someone and it just doesn't have a good vibe to it. So the text tells us, so they hated him even more. And the tension is just escalating. It's like tension is the compound interest on the investment of some kind of emotional or mental strain. Well, the text goes on, when you add all this up, the bad report, the hate. Why did they hate Joseph? Well, the author reduces it to one phrase, and this is the next slide. He simply says, the brothers were jealous of him. You may remember from a study several months ago when we broke down the word jealousy. And jealousy is this idea where there is a perceived threat in my life. I have something that I do not want to give up. And whatever the perception is that someone or something is coming to take that away from me. So there's this perceived threat behind jealousy. That's why when you do a study of the word tension, especially relational tension, There's strong similarities or an interconnectedness with jealousy and tension. Oftentimes in tension, we feel that something is being taken from us. Someone or something is pulling something away from us that is extremely important to us, and it causes that tension. So as your pastor, let me check in for just a second. And is this hitting? You don't have to show hands this time, but is this hitting? Is there some kind of mental or emotional strain in a relationship that you have that's going to require you to be really good in tension? If so, I've got good news for you. Chapter 39. But before we get there, last week, the beginning of the week, I went up to Indiana with Bob and Yolande, and we went to this discipleship conference that they've been to multiple times, and this was my second run. And we went back to that same area in Fort Wayne, and I realized a couple of things. One, the flatland isn't so bad. You know, flatland just bothers me because it's really windy, and I hate wind. It just bothers me. It's so aggravating and frustrating. So go up there a little bit, but we're staying in this area called New Haven. So I drive down the road Monday evening a little bit, and I go actually into Fort Wayne. I'm like, oh, they have stuff here. I didn't realize that. There's Chick-fil-A, there's Starbucks, there's a mall, there's a Cane's, there's all kinds of really cool stuff. Nice lit up bridge too. It's a beautiful area. So Tuesday morning rolls around. We're just having a great time at the conference, but my daughter Sophie is sick, and she calls. She was like, you're always here when I'm sick, and you're gone this time. So I've got this little tug in my heart. You know, I'm going to go home early, maybe to be with her, but I'm like, no, that's valuable information. So I'm looking at the schedule for Wednesday, and it's only a half day, and I'm thinking maybe I could slip out a little early. And then I just feel this nudge. Yes, you need to go home early. So I tell Bob and Yolande I'm going to go back home a little early, miss the second day, but I'll follow up with them and everything. So I'm traveling home, and I get this notification that Michelle and Sophie had left home. Thankfully, not permanently, okay? Don't hear me saying that. It's just a notification they had left, and I'm like, oh, they're going to get ice cream. So I hop on the phone real quick, and I'm like, you better get me some. You know, where are you going? But I'm like, where are you going? And they're like, well, my sister called, and I'm going to be very vulnerable for just a moment, because I want your prayers for our family. I desperately want your prayers for our family right now. We're in a very tense time. So I'm on my way home, and I call, and I can just hear it in Michelle's voice. Something's up. So I pull over, and luckily there is a Chick-fil-A in the area. So I pull over to get some Jesus chicken and to get a shot of Jesus after what she had told me. So she told me that she's on her way to her sister's house to get her sister's 2 children, because her sister has just been the victim of an intense episode of domestic violence. It required the authorities, and it was very extreme. Anything that you could think of was involved. So long story short, we got the call, and we had to accept custody of her 2 children. Luckily, she was released from everything in a very quick manner. There's no charges on her or anything, but it's going to be a few days before her children are released back into her custody. And I just want you to pray for her sister, for these children, for everyone involved, because it's a very difficult time for us. And on the way home, after the Jesus chicken, even after the Jesus chicken, I'm driving, and I start thinking about this whole scenario. And I'm thinking about this setup, and I start to just lose it. I'm very protective, especially of the people that are extremely important to me. So I start going through scenarios in my mind, how I'm going to react and respond to this situation. And I find myself in one of these contexts where maybe you've been there, where the more you think about it, the more worked up you become. You ever been there? And I'm just literally losing it to the point I just smash my hand into the console here. That reminded me that I needed to pull over again and get some coffee, just take a little break. So I'll pull over again and do a little praying, and then I start to think, oh, David, what an opportunity for you to recalibrate and become good in tension. Use this real-time experience to grow, develop, and get good in this tense moment. That's exactly what happens in Genesis chapter 39. Now, if you're following along, feel free to read along, but we do not have this on the screen because I want you to hear it. I want you to hear these words because Joseph is actually sent away by his brothers. And while he's sent away, he gets a really, really good job just by happen chance. He gets a great setup, and things are going really well in his life based on the circumstances that he's been basically sold into human trafficking. So he's kind of rescued and gets some stability, and he's in a house of a guy that he's working for. And this guy's wife comes and makes an advance toward Joseph. And the moment is tense because there's a lot at stake. But here's how Joseph responds, and I want you to get this. It's almost like a step-by-step pattern, and I guarantee you that one of these steps will apply to you, if not all of them. And some of you are very perceptive readers. You get this text, and when you hear this, you'll see a progression. And this could turn into a personal tool for you, where in any given moment that is tense, and you want to be good in that moment, you can see yourself walking through these steps. But Joseph has this tense moment develop. And right at the beginning, he does something that I did on the way home, and I did it on the way home because of what is written in this text. I stopped, and I checked myself. So as this opportunity arises for Joseph to involve himself with this tense moment, the text simply tells us, Joseph refused. So simple. In other words, Joseph knew who he was, and he recalibrated himself to the reality of his life. And he said, this is how I'm going to behave, and this is how I'm not going to behave. He refused. He drew a personal line in the sand and said, I will not overstep this boundary. And maybe that's the first step for you. It's tense. When you go back home, it's tense. And you need to draw a line in the sand that says, I'm not going to act in a certain way. I'm different. I'm called to be different. That's going to be my first step, acknowledging that. It goes on. He refused, and then he goes into this mental review of his life. And just listen to this mental process that Joseph demonstrates. He says, with me in charge, because this lady had made an advance, and if people find out, if he accepts and people find out, his life tanks again. So this mental review, he starts reviewing his life, and he says, with me in charge? There's no way. My master does not concern himself with anything in the house. I'm his go-to guy. Everything he owns, he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. And my master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. And maybe that's the step for you, where you review what has happened in your life and led you to a position to where you don't need to behave in a certain way. You are the one who needs to draw the boundary. You are the one who needs to be the change. You are the one who will say, no way. With all of these responsibilities, with all that I've been called to, with all that's going on that's good in my life, there's no way I'll accept this invitation. I'm going to be good intention. And then he drops this line. He says, he's not withheld anything from me except you because you're a wife. And then he says this, and I bet he says this in one of those whisper ways, where he's no longer talking to this lady. Instead, he's talking to himself. He says, how could I do such a wicked thing and to sin against my God? In other words, all of the positive stuff that is going on in Joseph's life, he's attributing to the hand and work of God. So to make this move would invalidate everything that God is doing for him. That's a mature move right there. Yes, I could do this. Yes, I want to do this. Yes, it is appealing, but to do so doesn't even risk my reputation. It risks my reputation in his eyes. I hope you're there. And if you're not there, I hope that's one of your prayers to get there. To acknowledge that any move you make, even smashing your hand into the console, risks the relationship between you and I, between us and our God. In other words, when we mess up, when we make a mistake, when we sin, the first violation is against Him and His ways. How can I do this and sin against my God? And then he goes on. And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. And on one day, he went into the house to attend to his duties. Did you catch that? Even in this awkward, tense time, he is sold out to carrying out his responsibilities. So a question for you as your pastor: when it gets tense in your life, do the things that matter most, that you and only you can do in the setup or the situation, do they start to fall off? Do you drift from them? Are they neglected? Because in this tense time, Joseph is continuing to carry out his responsibilities. What about us? And then the text goes on and it ends. So she caught him by the cloak and said, "Come to bed with me." But he left his cloak in her hand and he ran out of the house. In other words, it reaches a moment to where he actually removes himself from this tense setup. And I tell you, there may be times, and like we talked about last week, sometimes you and I actually need permission as adults to do some stuff that is really healthy. But we grew up in regions or homes or with people that did not nurture that within us. So we don't know the healthy move to make. But there are times, and I'm granting you permission right now, there are times when you are in such a tense time, when it's so unhealthy, that the best thing to do for you to be good intention is to simply take a step back. Remove yourself from the situation. Those are the qualities that help us become good intention. Now, with the time we have left, which is what, about 45, what? Laughing. Okay, all right. We got about 10 minutes left, okay? Is that good? Negotiate here, will 10 work? So the time we have left, I want to do just a little Bible study because there's something in this text I don't want us to miss. Two things. One's a little shorter, one's a little longer. And I don't want to miss these things because I think they're extremely powerful, especially when we talk a lot around here at Madison Hills about investing in other people's lives, being involved in their lives, making sure that we are in tune with the Holy Spirit and how God is leading us to bring good into other people's lives. There's several passages in this chapter that are just amazing. One is, we don't have this on the screen, I'm just getting to my points right now, okay? So chapter 39, verse 5, the text tells us that God actually blessed the house of Potiphar that Joseph was in simply because of Joseph. In other words, God is going to use you to bless other people simply because you're allowing Him to use you. And if you're good intention, that increases the possibility that you and I are willing to allow God to lead us into the lives of other people so that He can make a difference in their world. It's a beautiful story going on here. But I have a problem with Joseph's dad. Not so much his brothers. I get all the damage they did to Joseph, but I have a big problem with Joseph's dad. When we read this story, so we go back to chapter 37, Joseph is sharing these dreams that he had with his brothers and his mom and dad. And he actually has two dreams. One's about the brothers and one's about his parents, where his parents actually come and bow down before Joseph as well. So Joseph relays these dreams to his dad. And his dad actually, the text tells us, rebuked his son. And not only did he rebuke him, he actually questioned him very sarcastically. Will your mother and I actually come and bow down to you? A side question. How old is Joseph in this story? Anybody know? He's 17. 17. The question that his father asks him only exists because Joseph is young. That's the only reason this question exists. Will your mother and I actually come and bow down before you. He's 17. Now, here's the problem I have. The story goes on. It says his brothers, they're fussing around and all that. But the father kept this in mind. His father is named Jacob. His name was changed to Jacob. It was previously, or his father's name was Jacob, but it was changed to Israel. So the problem I have with the dad is this. He keeps this matter in mind. He could have stopped this whole thing. He could have ended it before it started. And he should have. Because Jacob had a father and his name was Isaac. And Isaac had a father and his name was Abraham. And there was this promise given to Abraham that God was going to use Abraham and his descendants. And he was going to turn the descendants of Abraham as numerous as the stars in the sky or the sand on the seashore. So when it comes down to Isaac, he passes this promise on to his son, Jacob, whose name is changed to Israel. What did Israel think? That this promise stopped with him? That it simply ended there? He should have done more than kept the matter in mind. He should have perpetuated this promise and understood what God was doing in Joseph's life. So, question for you. How you doing with the people who are younger in your world? Are you setting them up for success? Are you introducing them into their God-given potential? Or have you never even considered that because there's just this assumption that what God is doing in our life stops with me? Several years ago, this idea started complicating my life. It started bothering me big time, especially related to my children and the younger generation. So I started thinking about this, especially with my children. And I developed this question that I've been asking myself for years now that helps recenter me toward the purposes and plans and promises of God so that I make sure as a parent and as a pastor, I'm not allowing those promises to just end with me. And the question is simply this. I started asking myself about my children. Am I leading them or are they just following me? Am I actually leading them to their God-given potential, or are they just following me because I'm their dad? This is such a reality check for you and I to realize that there are people coming after us. And there's some valuable content that we should be passing on to them. And if we're never, ever, ever growing and getting good intention, then that's never, ever, ever going to happen. He should have kept this vision alive. He should have heard these dreams, understood that God was speaking to Joseph and developing his son so that he could move him along with this promise of God. There's a great book called Growing With, and any parents in here with children that you are growing with, whether they're a little younger, a little older, or even into adulthood, it's a fantastic book. And the authors just set out a wonderful premise that they want to create this idea, this concept, where the parents and the children are growing with one another. Whatever season of life they're in, they're growing with, and it's this mutual investment. This mutual intentionality where they're working together and they're not just allowing any goodness to stop with them, but they're intentionally passing that on to their children. That is fantastic. So, any questions on that, please see me afterward. I have a huge heart for family, and I'd love to talk more with you about that. Second thing, not so long. When you read through Genesis 39, something really, really cool happens. 3 times the author drops this phrase, the Lord was with Joseph. And I simply want to end with a very simple suggestion for you this morning. 3 times, once at the beginning and then twice kind of near the end, the author drops this line, and the Lord was with Joseph. So Joseph in chapter 39 has a little bit of a roller coaster ride. It's bumpy for him. The tension doesn't just go away. He learns how to be good in tension. And 3 times the author tells us the Lord was with Joseph. And I want to make the argument this morning that's simply because Joseph was with his Lord. He did not give up on his Lord. He did not ignore his Lord. He did not turn his back on his Lord, regardless of how tough or thick the tension got. Instead, he relied upon his Lord so that he could get good intention. If we need to talk about the tension in your life, please see me after service. If it's so unbearable for you, maybe the question we need to ask is not, is the Lord with me? As much as, am I with him? Are his ways that important to me that I'll use his ways to work through the tense times in my life? God, thank you so much for being who you are, the one true living God. And that's who we acknowledge, our Lord, who is with us. And Father, for anything we do, think, or say that takes us away from that reality, that takes us away from the awareness that you are the one true God, we ask you to forgive us. And we are so thankful for your faithfulness to us, Father, and your presence in our lives. And we're thankful for your ways, because your ways work even in tense moments. So right now, Father, we ask that you guide every single one of us in our real-time experiences. Guide us to take these steps that we see in the life of Joseph so that you can help us grow so that we are really good intention. And we trust that you will use us in ways we couldn't even conceive of once we do so. God, you're good, and we know that because of your Son, Jesus. So as always, we use his name to pray and praise you. Amen.